chair position in the year before, and Todd, who's our guest today, is good buddies with Tom as I am as well, and we see each other a lot for different business functions, deals, solving business problems, all those kinds of things. And just a brief bit about me is just that today I run 3 of our own companies, so 2 engineering firms and a technology firm of varying sizes. Overall, we're, in terms of people, we're, I guess, south of 200 people spread out all over the West. I also have a great deal of interest in corporate governance, and so I spend a lot of time in the boardroom on various things. I currently chair Innovate Edmonton, which is the organization that we like to call a startup that is trying to get even more momentum behind our innovation economy here in Edmonton. We're funded by the city of Edmonton as well as a bunch of others too. And I also chair Prairie Sky Gondola, and I'm an investor in that company that's trying to build a gondola from Wide Avenue down to Rossdale and up to the top of Bank and behind Central Station. So I kind of split my time between my companies and some community work that I like to do, as well as some investment work I like to do. So it's, and for me, I think that, I know Todd's going to get into it a whole bunch here along with the rest of us in terms of sales and marketing. But as we've all have discovered, I think over the years, it's you can have some pretty darn good ideas from a technology perspective or any kind of business perspective, but if you can't sell and get revenue, you're kind of hooped. And that, I think, is some of the challenges that a lot of younger, especially entrepreneurs, have. Is how do you sort of find that once you got the great idea, how do you execute on the plan? And this is a pretty big part of it, which is how do you get out there? And today, I think there's a lot more channels to go through. But I have a keen interest in constantly growing our own companies and figuring out how we're going to grow our businesses, even though we're well established. In some cases, others we're not. It's tough, and hopefully folks can get some information out of our experience here in this session and even the other ones coming. So I'll hand it over to Todd, I guess. Hey, Colin, and he can tell us about him.
Am I up?
Yeah,
you're up,
please,
Todd.
That would be great. Yeah, as you mentioned there, Nasim, just to enter on the whole podcast thing, happy to do podcasts, but definitely a face for radio. So on my side, but great. Let's go, Todd. I'd love to hear more about you. Nice to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, no, nice to meet you, Colin, and thank you, Nasim, and thanks to the MacEwan guests. And so I guess I think the place to start is with a bit of housekeeping. So I'm not an academic. I'm more of the business fun guy. I like to do fun stuff, and through that I get success through business, which is kind of a funny thing. So I think for context, it's probably best. I don't want to spend too much time on myself, but I think I want to share my story, because in order for you to understand how I think, you have to go back to where my youth and how I was brought up. And I think for any entrepreneur, they're going to go through a lot of different challenges, and our parents really shape kids in ways which are positive and negative. And out of that, they spit out some sort of rendition of themselves, which will be what they want to be or not. So I got a pretty incredible life. So born January 5th, 1965, I'm 56 years old. My mother married a jet named Ron Babiak. They split when I was 2. I had a brother. My dad took my brother to Grand Prairie. This is a fundamental shift. So I'm 2, my brother's 3. Mom takes me. Dad goes to Grand Prairie. Dad's a sports guy, plays baseball. My brother ends up being a pro golfer. Mom was not an entrepreneur or nothing. She just made ends meet and raised a dude who ended up being an entrepreneur. So without my life would have been a lot different if the family stayed together. I would have been a sports guy too, I'm sure. But we couldn't make that call back in the day. So that was the first fundamental shift, was the separation of my mother and father, and then the brothers being split apart. I didn't see my brother or my dad till I was 16 at my grandma's funeral. So that was a whole other thing we'll maybe unpack later. Soon after that, I was 4 years old. My mother married a guy named Todd Bish. Bish was a sales manager for CFCW Radio in Edmonton. flamboyant guy, life of the party, stern, strict, abusive. He was a good father, but he was an asshole as a father as well. So again, there's a lot to unpack with that. So he was with me until I was 14. So just a few stories about him. So he's the kind of guy that would rule with an iron fist. He gave you some latitude, but you know, he came down real hard mentally and physically. And that was fundamental for me because it shaped me in a way to learn what I shouldn't do with my son. So, you know, I would get backhands quite often from him. And if I did the smallest slip up, he would have me doing chores. And we had a recreation resort out by Drayton Valley, and I'd be 8 years old and I'd be digging waterline trenches. So I'd have a shovel and I would be laying down the water hose and eating strawberries and laying down hose all solo. So I could tell countless stories of, he would put me in positions that were very odd for a young man. And I guess you can call that maybe some true spirit, because I think I learned a lot through that, but it was certainly lessons of, you know, you figure life out on your own. So with Bish, I took all the positives and put it into my life. All the negatives, I flushed down the toilet. And there was more negatives than positives, but it was impactful. So then they were common law. So mom and Bish split when I was 14, and then mom marries a gent named Walter Zepik, who was in the furniture business, and they are together today. So they've been together now for 40 years. So when I finished high school, I had hair much longer than Colin's and Colin. It was down to the crack of my back, and I was smoking a lot of pot. I really had no direction, and my mom said, okay, Todd, we're going to send you down to Miami to see Bish, because Bish had since left. He left Alberta when I was about 16. We're down to Florida to start a yacht club. So mom said to me when I'm 18, okay, you're going to go see Bish. He's going to tune you up because you have no future. You're not doing anything right. I said, fine, I'll go down there and I'll see Bish. So it was supposed to be a 3-month stint. And so I fly down into Marsh Harbor, Abacos, meet up with Bish. And then came the second phase of the Bish program, where he taught me how to sail, ended up being a boat captain. That was super cool. He had funny ways of teaching lessons. And I remember one thing, and this goes down to the lesson of visualization. And we all hear about this thing, but until you actually do it, it's hard to even describe it. So you can read books on this all day long, but I'm not the best learner. And so I had a real hard time understanding how to tie this certain knot. And he would get in my head and yell at me to get this knot figured out. And I just froze. I couldn't get my head around it. And there was a whole thing around this stupid knot. And one night I went to bed and I just played it in my head. I played it in my head again and again and again and then again to tie the knot. And the next day I got up and I tied a knot. So in its simplistic form, that was so cool because I learned something about myself. And I wish Bish had been more delicate in how he taught the lesson, but I still learned a lesson. So that was another shift where I knew if I thought things through mentally, I could actually get to yes on it. And that was a good lesson when I was at that point 18. So I ended up being a boat captain. This is my post-secondary. I call it UAB, University of Bahamas. So age 18 and 19, I'm on a 30-foot sailboat in the Bahamas, and I am a boat captain, and I'm chartering families throughout the Abacos in the Bahamas. I never had any life skills. I wasn't a great student. Bish was a tyrant, but he put me in positions I had to figure shit out. So I'm now a boat captain. I'm having crews and now responsible for the lives of these crews, for families and kids. And I had to really understand how to communicate. And I wasn't a great communicator, but I had to really figure it out just by trial and error. And I made so many mistakes, but I call it my best post-secondary because, you know, I think of school, and my son's actually right now in business at MacEwan. I just had lunch with him. He's working at CIBC at the bank right now. But, you know, it's a funny thing when you can, you know, school teaches you the fundamentals of the pragmatic stuff, but how do you get the lessons about how do you communicate? How do you actually break through? How do you sell? And so, you know, we're always selling. But when you're that young, you don't even realize it. So you have to find a way to communicate. So that was a real big breakthrough for me, was really finding my way to yes with people I didn't know by way of figuring out how to communicate, not through school, not through anything else, but just by, if you didn't do it, the boat might sink, right? So you had to teach how to sail and pull the sheets and raise the sails and all that sort of thing. So 2 years with Bish, and the frustrating thing there is I made no money. I had no money. I would fish for my food. I had the same pair of sneakers, same pair of shorts. So I was living in poverty in the Bahamas, and that was okay. I had a boat, and I had lots of women that would come on the boat and sail with me. So that was a pretty good thing when you're 18, 19. That was the benefit. But so I really experienced poverty. I would get tips, and I was so grateful for the tips when I got them, but I had no money, and Bish never paid me. And there's a whole story around that. So 2 years with him, I finally said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm done with all your horse shit. So I left him and his quasi yacht club, lived with a buddy in Miami, right on Brickell Avenue, called the Four Ambassadors, for 1 year. This was another big shift. So I would have been 20 at this point. Keith Joffrey took me into his 1-bedroom suite in the Four Ambassadors. And again, I had no money. So we were right on the Biscayne Bay in Florida. And there was a marina. And there was a lawyer that would always come on a Saturday with his little Alfa Romeo. He'd park it. He'd take girls out in his yacht, sail around Biscayne Bay, and he'd come back. And so I introduced myself to him and said, Ed, I don't mind washing your car when you're out doing this thing on Biscayne Bay. I can wash your car for you, and I'll charge you $20. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. So I started washing his car, and then when he docked his boat, I would hop on the boat and I would clean up all the panties and whatever else, and wash the boat down and take care of all that. And then he hired me to build him a dock at his house, and so he really took me under his wing. And he was a lawyer, and so he would quiz me on, okay, Todd, what are you doing? What are you all about? And I remember this one moment when he said, you should come to my office and see what I do. And all I had was a pair of shorts, and I had a golf shirt. So and actually he wanted me to come to court so I could see him in action in court. So I didn't have a suit, I didn't have pants, I had none of this stuff. So I walk up to the courthouse, I meet Ed, and he goes, well, you're in shorts. And I said, yeah, that's all I got. He said, well, you can't come in, you got to be in a suit. And I felt pretty bad about that, and I'm pretty embarrassed. But so again, you don't know what you don't know. So he really accepted me for who I was, and I learned a lot from him. So when I just before I turned 21, I said, okay, 3 years down in Florida, it's been a good run. I'm tired of being a captain. I've seen people with lots of money who own boats. I don't want to be the captain. I want to own the boat. I want to go back. I want to be a lawyer like Ed. So I'm going to go back to Canada and start my career. So I came back to Canada when I was 21, started to go do upgrades for school to become a lawyer. And in the meantime, again, I was still broke. So my stepfather, who was in the furniture business, offered me a job to come and just do part-time sales for him. So I was, like I said, 21. So I'm studying school, and now I'm working for my stepfather, and I end up having success in sales. So my job in the early days was to walk out to architectural firms and pitch them on products. And a lot of these firms had young women, kind of a theme here for some reason, but anyway. And I would call on these young women, and they would buy what I was selling, which would be product for their projects. So I worked with him for 8 years. I gave up my ambition to be a lawyer, did the math on articling and being in the seat of the law firm, make partner when you're 40, make big bucks maybe when you're 48, 50. And I just thought, no, I can do a lot better in sales. So 8 years with my stepfather as a manufacturer rep. And then when I turned 30, I said, Pop, it's been a great run. I'm going to branch out on my own and take a stab at being a frontline contract furniture dealer. So it's kind of funny how you get to that. And I had no business sense. And I realized today, I hire people that are much more smarter than I, that have MBAs, and they have all these big fancy words, and they're super smart, and they intimidate me, but they never pull the trigger. Meaning that they can be the smartest people in the world, but if you don't have what it takes to pull the trigger, you're never going to get to be that entrepreneur that's going to get stuff done. And I think if I was smarter at 30, I might not have done it. but all I could think about was my youth and the way I was brought up and the poverty, and thinking, okay, I'm born in Canada. You can do this in Canada if you choose to. It's not like you're born in Angola or born in Russia where you're repressed and you can't become something. So out of the gate, there's an advantage. So yeah, I'm born in Canada. I could be an entrepreneur. I can figure shit out and I can get it done. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. So I pitched my hat at 30, my tent, and I just start selling. And the crazy stories out of the gate, right? Like no bank financing, borrowing money wherever you can get it to close a deal. No one believes in you, and you just grind it out. You grind it out. You grind it out, and eventually you got to win. And then you got to win. And then you got to win. And that's really how it started. But those early days are so tough. And so, what I ended up being, I think, decent at was communicating. And I was able to tell a story around a product or a situation and get to a solution, to get to a yes through it. And Nasim, you'll hear me talk about this all the time. We got to get to yes. We got to get to yes. And it's a funny thing because, no is easy. We can always, with anything, no. Can't do that. Nah, don't want to do that. Though, I mean, those to me, those are the two worst words in the language when it comes to being an entrepreneur is no and I can't. And you will never get to where you need to be using those words. So whenever I hear them, I always I lean in, I'll find a way to yes, and I'll find a way to make it work. Now, I use that more in entrepreneurship. Of course, if someone says to you, just go rob a bank, you're not going to say yes, you're going to go hard no. But when it comes to doing the tough stuff in life, going out and leaning into life, putting in the 18-hour days. In my case, installing my own furniture, sell it, install it, after service it. Like I would do all that for the first 5 years after I started the business. And you had to lean into life, and you had to have the grit to get through it. And if you didn't, I don't think you'd make it. But all of you on the call, and Steve knows this, you can, but you got to just, you can't take the easy route. I don't think there's any easy route out there. So it becomes a situation where you have to go all in and just, you figure it out. So, my ride has been phenomenal, and I'm surprised that I sit here today. I don't have a lot of lessons. I got some core principles about how I run the business. I hire great people that know more than I do. I went to a coaching class called Strategic Coach in Santa Monica for 6 years, and they wrote you through all this Colby tests, and they figure out who you are and how you think, and so what I learned about myself, and this was a fundamental lesson for me, was, through my personality and how I think and how fast I react and get things done. So I'm a quick start, which means I don't overthink, I don't analyze. I just, if it's a good idea, I'll go and I'll march forward. I won't have a way to get to yes on it in my mind on how to make it successful, but I'll burn a bridge behind me, so I have to go forward. I won't fall back on my laurels. So what that means is that I won't analyze. My president is an analytical guy. He'll analyze till he's paralyzed. I'll just say, go, get it done, and we'll figure it out. And I'm not sure that's the best way in business, but for me, that's work, because analysis can kill the entrepreneur. So I got this president now. We have this very unique relationship where I'm fast go, and he analyzes it. We find a nice medium. But back to my coaching classes. So what they taught me was, so in your life, professional life, do what you love to do, and all the minutia that you don't like to do, don't do it. So if it's HR, if it's accounting, if it's whatever it is, get somebody else to do that, because if you try and do it at this stage, you're going to do a shitty job of it. The results will be horrible. You'll be miserable, and the client won't be happy. So let other people do that and do what you love. And so when I started to really understand that, that's where you get the horsepower. So, okay, you understand how your personality is, you understand how you think. So go to your sweet spot, stuff you love to do, and step on the gas pedal, and everything else, delegate it. And so that's been a great ride. And then, along the way too, I have to mention, this is about sales and marketing, and I've never really been a marketer. I know how to sell, but your network is fundamental. And so when I first started the business, I was 30. When I was 32, I approached EO, Entrepreneurs Organization in Edmonton. and great community of leaders. To get into EO, you have to have $1 million of revenue and I think 20 employees. And it's peer-to-peer, and they have forums and all these great things that help entrepreneurs. Put my hat in the ring. A competitor of mine blocked me, and they weren't allowed to do that, but they did it. And so I went for, so there's a couple organizations. EO was the starter. YPO was the next level up, which is a $10 million revenue. And then I think 50 employees you have to join YPO. So didn't make EO. When I qualified for YPO, I signed up. And again, that was a game changer. And I would encourage anybody that's looking to get into business, create a network and create organizations around you that have big networks, because that's where I met Nasim and Tom Riddle, and I met all these stallions that were just running 1,000 miles an hour, and they're just human beings. They're like you and I, but when you meet someone like Nasim or Tom Riddle or Brett Wilson, or the list goes on and on and on, and you have a talk with them, well, they're just like talking to you people, anybody. They're human beings, but they've done some extraordinary things because they think a bit differently. And being with that organization, again, that was a major asset in my career. And I've met, I've traveled the world in YPO. I've met crazy entrepreneurs that have done incredible things, and it just gives me more courage. It gives me more understanding that if I lean in, I can do what these guys have done, because they're just like me, but they just said yes. They didn't say no. So that was been without a doubt the single most important thing I've done in my career, other than say yes when I was 30 to the business, was join YPO and leverage that in all ways, shapes, and form. And there's so many learnings through that. It's helped me with my son. Not with my marriage, because my wife and I split 14 months ago. Whole long story, which I won't get into, but my son and I are awesome, and my wife's still good, but she's on her own. But it's an organization that really helps you in so many ways. And so you fast forward to today, I'm CEO of Solutions Group of Companies. We have 4 companies. We have a contract office furniture division. We have a interior construction company. We have a flooring division company, which is all commercial flooring. And we have a lab furnishings company, and we're just taking all this national right across Canada, headquartered here in Edmonton. I welcome many of you to come by our showroom if you want to actually have a one-on-one talk and see our facility. I'd love to show you around. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of my story, and that's probably a good place to leave it, and just see if there's any questions or comments, and then we can go from there.
Todd, thank you. That's awesome. Nasim, do you want to weigh in on anything or start off the question?
Yeah. For sure. I think, the kind of, Todd and I guess, will consider each other maybe old school in terms of, before we had search engine optimization and all kinds of other shtick that I know what the acronyms and the words are, and we do it in the background, but I have no idea how it gets done. But your point about building a network it's wearing out shoes, right? And it's shoe leather, it's breakfasts, it's lunch, it's dinners, it's meeting people, it's putting yourself out there in a substantial way. When I first moved back to Edmonton myself, and the second time around is Todd and I and got to know each other during that period of time, is you spend a significant amount of time building a network of other people that you want to hang out with or get to know as friends, but they're also connections, and it's also business. And it's really, really hard to not grow a business if you actually don't have that large network. Now, there are obviously lots of companies today that don't do that kind of work precisely to win contracts. I'm thinking of software as a service, for example, is a completely different way of winning customers. But frankly, the challenge from an innovation perspective in Edmonton is not ideas, it's revenue. And what companies can't get is revenue. And you want to be able to go from 100,000 ARR to $1 million ARR to 2 million ARR, and go from 1 million to 2 in, I don't know, 4 months or something. You got to wear out a lot of shoe leather and talk to a lot of people that are going to write you POs. And it's those fundamental business skill sets that the sort of old school hardcore get in there, talk to people. As Todd will always say to you, how do you get to yes, as he said already, is that sort of basic channel of selling is extremely useful still today in terms of building those networks. The challenge becomes how do you scale beyond that and grow people around you? And, you know, so at Williams, we've built a fantastic sales team. I know Todd has as well. And you obviously need sales teams in each geographic center that you end up. If you're going to be a pan-Canadian company, you need sales teams everywhere that are going to be knocking on doors, asking for work, asking for the PO, closing the deal, all those old school things that we always kind of heard about is along the way, and I'm sure in all of your other journeys, but it's ultimately it's about revenue. And some of the other sessions we have, we're going to talk about some of the other finer components of what is difficult for entrepreneurs, but you can't make the sale and then you can't deliver the sale, you're not a business. And those things need to happen. And it takes some grit. And I love, Todd, I know that's one of your favorite words, but that is precisely, I think, the word that sort of defines Todd is you need grit. You need that. You need grit to make it go, because you have a lot of people to convince about why they should buy your product or service. But so there's a lot to that, I think, and which is why we wanted to talk about it here so much, is because it is the hardest part. And so naturally, I'm an engineer, and naturally, if you looked at my personality profile, I am not a outward guy. I'm not I'm missing the word. I'm not an extrovert naturally. I'm an introvert naturally, and I had to learn through the selling process to grow our business to become an extrovert, to add those skill sets on, which are unnatural for me, and that's a bit of, you know, sort of getting to know yourself too. And a lot of, I think it's some of the, you know, the younger entrepreneurs that are especially more tech inclined, they're very technical. Maybe they're engineers or comp sci or whatever they are in terms of their background and training. But those folks with the super bright ideas about what it is that, you know, what SaaS product or what business they want to start, they understand the business, the product extremely well, but they maybe actually don't have all the fundamental skill sets to actually go and sell. And a lot of times, I think Todd's seen this, is I think a lot too, and likely you have as Colin as well, is that startup partner that you find along the way needs to be in some ways the polar opposite to you in terms of complexities. It's a bit of a yin and the yang thing, where if you've got the serious product, technical, engineering kind of whatever guy or gal for sure, then find the mate to that. That's going to allow you, between two of you as startup, either co-CEOs or partners, to make it go, because we all don't have the skills we need. And Todd's talked about that too. To make it go, it takes a lot more people to make that happen. And that's not easy when you don't have any money, right? You can't just go out and hire a full team, right, to make it go. It all goes very iteratively and slow, right? So there's a lot to what Todd's saying about getting people to yes and figuring out what that channel is. In our case, it's been shoes. And the next sort of more modern version of that is a lot more automatic, but it still takes shoes, because people want to know people before they buy from you. It's around relationships. So we find ourselves getting on airplanes sometimes to close deals as well, especially if they're remote to the business. So just a couple sort of add on more thoughts about what Todd's saying there. We're all not disposed to it. We might be opposed to it, but if you can't do it, find somebody that can. Build a team around those that can help you with that, getting to your first whatever number of dollars in ARR.
That's awesome, Nasim, and thank you, Todd. I think that's really good. So I'm going to drag it back a couple of years, back to the beginning. I love what you said, Nasim. Actually, Todd mentioned it too. You need to supplement yourself, right? Either you're going to be the salesman or you're going to need to get a salesman, right? Because, even Drucker said, you don't have a business if you don't have a client, right? And that's really what it is. It's a really fancy hobby until you start to sell something. But going back to the original days, Nasim, this might be a little bit more applied to you. You said that you're the engineering type, the introverts, the guy behind the scenes, and not necessarily the front line guy, but you had to learn to do that anyway. So if you can go back into those early days, what are some of the skills or elements in your brain, and maybe Todd, you can weigh in on this too, that kind of forced you out of your seat, out of your comfort, to get the leather on the street, like you said, get your shoes on the street and start going and picking up that phone call. There's no substitute for that. How did you get that going?
Before Nasim answers, I just want to throw this out, and I think this is a great segue, Colin, because I watched Nasim do his magic. So I just want to tell this quick story. Then sorry, Nasim, I'm gonna put you on the spot here a bit, but I was so impressed by what you did back in the day. Because in Williams Engineering, there were two back-to-back incidents that took out the entire leadership of Williams Engineering by way of plane crashes. And then this gent from Calgary, who's the next in line to take it over, is Nasim Bashir. And I'd never met Nasim prior to the funeral for Regan Williams. And there's this tall, handsome, silver-haired dude that I see, overlooking the entire crowd. He's such a tall man, and he's captivating. But it was also a very somber event. But so we got through that. Then I got a chance to meet Nasim, and he didn't know anybody in Edmonton. Like he was an outsider. This is what, Nasim, 12 years ago, maybe something like that. Yeah, 12 years ago. But he had in my mind, he had made a mental shift. And he mentioned this about, souls on the ground, boots on the ground, however he mentioned it. But he made a conscious decision to hit every single gala in Edmonton, hop on boards, become part of charities, join YPO. So I can't think of anyone that fast-tracked their way to the ends of Edmonton than Nasim did, because it takes a lifetime to get these connections. And he did it in the course of 4 years. And he was he was on the board of the EEA. He was chairing other things. He's on countless boards. He is one of the best known entrepreneurs in the city, and yet he spent most of his life in Calgary, and so he knew he couldn't just hop on and put the captain's hat on at Williams and say, okay, let's go. He knew he had to get out and meet people, and I don't worry today about the entrepreneurs, all this tech, and I'm kind of confused, and I'd love to hear about this at some point, but all the young entrepreneurs, how are they thinking about that? How are they, it seems like you can build a product, but unless you actually go and start talking to people and finding how to break through that, I think you're dead. And Nasim, for an introvert, he mentally shifted to get that done. So sorry, Nasim, I just wanted to share that with the group, because I'm always impressed on how you pulled that off.
Yeah, well, that was exactly it. And I think that's precisely the answer to Colin's question is that it actually comes through adversity. And in each stage in my career, every single one of those stages, it came through adversity, where you just absolutely had to do something, right? Where there was no other choice. There was nobody else around. You look around the room and there's nobody else there except for you to go and do it. And so you could quit, right? Exactly. Or you look in the mirror and say, okay, let's get on with it, right? And get it done. And when it has to a certain extent, it has its tolls. And I actually find this is, I think, an interesting piece maybe for some of those introverts out there, is you actually have to find a way to be able to create a relief valve for the fact that you're not who you really are, but you have to be somebody else for a while. And I'm not talking about wearing a Halloween costume kind of thing. It's we all have personas, and we have personas that we naturally drift back to. So look at who you are on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and what it is you like to do, and whether you like to go out with friends Saturday morning or stay the hell away from everybody. And I'm the guy who likes to turn off. But you need to find that mechanism along the way when you take on that persona. You need to find a mechanism to get the right amount of rest and other things in order to be able to fix that delta that you're currently operating under. Otherwise, you'll probably explode or die of a heart attack or something like that in that process. And mine's sleep and the gym. That's it. Like those two things are really key. And the other part of it is turning off in between. I did, but it took me 10 years to figure that out, but it took me a long time to do that. But so anyways, getting back to your question, Colin, is really about adversity. And I think finding adversity, traveling, putting yourself under conditions where you have to survive. If you're the only person that is my kids and my wife did this to me when we were traveling in South America a few years ago. and we get camped in this little tiny hotel in Colombia, and the waitress comes up and says in Spanish, "What would you like for breakfast?" And nobody speaks Spanish. And so you just go for it, right? You start, oh, well, I can figure out that's eggs, it's huevo, that's this, that's that. You got to put yourself, I think, under those sort of stressful conditions to kind of figure out, to stress your brain, right? Stress your actions. And the more you do that, and I've kind of done that in a serious way, I think sort of every, 5 to 10 years, re-stress myself in the business as careers change, because it actually allows you to grow substantially in terms of all the things you have. And that, and the selling bit, whether it was my first job was actually calling, I was actually probably more like a second job, but I was thinking of this the other day. And my boss said, "I don't really have a lot of work for you to do. So I am building a house in Mill Creek. And so can you take the concrete out of the basement?" And so, okay, I got nothing else to do. So I guess I'll take the concrete out of the basement. And one of my other jobs right after that was, "We don't have enough work for you to do, but you're working for us anyway. So I want you to cold call every industrial facility in the province and see if they need any electrical engineers." And so you just get on the phone and you phone 1,200 different companies, and you get no's, yeses, and people that want to talk to you because they're lonely. You get all kinds of things. And that kind of stresses your environment, but you kind of learn those things along the way. And I had no idea what it is I was really doing. I was just this, 19-year-old kid phoning people saying if they needed somebody to help them, right? And I think, again, if you, under those adverse conditions, which is you got to eat, you got to pay rent. I didn't have a family to take care of at that time, but if you want to do things, you need some adversity to make you go. And then you get adversity, I think, by moving around. I tell my kids, and although I don't think they're ever going to do it, I say to them, when you finish university, go to Singapore, work in Kuwait, go to Saudi Arabia, go to China. I don't know where you want to go, but go work under some stress for 5 years while you're young and can take it. And you'll learn twice as much as you would if you actually sat at home and, I don't know, rode your bike in the river valley, which is super cool. I love doing that today, but it's not a great way to learn how to grow a business, sell your business, and do all those kinds of things. Right?
That's awesome. I mean, as not maybe the only three old guys in the room, but how do you push people to do that? Like that is exactly it. I think I've learned more through the adversity, of course, than we've ever learned through just, going out and just giving it handed to us. So now both of you have taken kind of personality profiles, whether it was Covey or just, going through and understanding ourselves. I believe deeply that entrepreneurship, great entrepreneurs are very, very self-aware, both from the perspective of what we're good at and what we're not good at. But the one thing I heard you both say is, regardless of whether you're good or not at it, you just got to do it. Right. And so, if you can eventually find somebody to help you, whether it's a co-founder or anything else, but what were some of those elements, maybe when you were looking at your growth, that said, okay, here's a little bit about me, to hell with it, I got to do it anyway. What were some of those triggers that kind of helped that? Like, when you're right, and again, I go right down to the micro moment when, you've got that decision to make, and you like cold calling. Oh my goodness, right? I don't know many people that like cold calling. I know people that are good at it, but I don't know anybody that likes it. But sometimes you just got to do it. So against your personality, against your greatest fears, against your even desires to do anything different, how do you grind into it and step into it and do it?
I don't know. Yeah, go Todd. Yeah.
Well, I'll just weigh in for a quick second. So, Colin, I remember my first sale, and so you're super nervous. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You've been training for this, but you're like that. I remember being just so aware, and so I guess where I'm going with this, I got it over the goal line, and I was so happy. It's like, holy shit, I just sold something, and so when you get your first sale, I was selling like this file system to the federal government. And so when you get that first success, it's like, maybe I can do this. And it's funny how the momentum just for me really worked well. And I ended up taking the feds on as a client and sold them millions of dollars worth of product over the course of the years. And just so I would say I had a coach and mentor for a product line back in the day that walked me through, and I would tape record him. I would understand how he spoke and his body language and how he looked at people in the eye and how he explained to sell this thing. And I would play it again and again and again and again and again. And so that repetitive successful motion of hearing things helped me. And then when I got the sale, I kept on stepping on the gas pedal. But when you get your first success, then you go for the second and third and fourth, and then you create confidence. And when you get the confidence, you just again, back to finding your right yes, you're going to get there. But the worst thing is when they say no, is to quit. You just don't quit. You take the no, you learn from it, and you go at it again. You get no, and you go at it again. You get no, you go at it again. I got 3 books here, and I'll show you the other one. I'd love you all to get this one and read Phil Knight's story of Nike. And this read, you talk about a guy that didn't know what no meant. He went through so much adversity to build this iconic company, and he could have been no 1,000 times. Like the banking facilities he couldn't get, the manufacturing disruption he had over in Japan. Like he had all this crazy stuff happen to him, and he always found a way to yes. And on the brink of bankruptcy multiple times, and just think, we might not have ever had Nike if he just said no. He didn't say no. I mean, the story is phenomenal. And I read that book and I go, yeah, Phil, you dug in, you got it done. So over to you, Nasim.
Yeah. So Colin, what was the question already? I was just thinking about Phil Knight again because I read that book a couple years ago. But, yeah.
That is a great book, and I'll comment on Todd for a second and then shift it off to you with the similar question, Nasim. But to just pull it apart a little bit more, Todd. Yes, once you get a yes, it's awesome, right? And then you start building your confidence, you start going. But I think what I heard from you is you just gotta go and pick up the phone, whether you're listening to somebody else, whether you're afraid of making a mistake. It doesn't really matter. You just gotta kind of push through the first couple of times. But once you do, you start to learn. And that's the thing. I think I kind of try to explain to entrepreneurs a lot of the time. It's kind of like riding a bike. You fell off a bike a lot when you were learning, right? Or when you were walking, you learned to walk, you fell over a lot, but you kept pressing on. And whether it was just dumb determination or it was actually like a desire to get somewhere that you wanted to go, you figured it out eventually, right? And that's the same with this. You've got to go through a diversity or adversity and actually do it. Nasim, where I was going with the question was, okay, in that first sale, in the time when you're not comfortable in it and not excited about it, what were the things that were going through your head, and how did you make a decision to actually just shut up and pick up the phone and do it?
I think it came out of a desire to succeed. And I still remember the first when I graduated from engineering. The first thing I did, I finished off my term because I still had a semester left at the U of A, and then I moved to Yellowknife with my wife. There's another long story there. When we graduated, I'll tell you very shortly because it's how things change sometimes. So when we were finishing university, both my wife and I, she was a nursing student at the U of A as well, got married, had it last semester. We're figuring out what do we want to do? And I wanted to be an expat. And I said, okay, well, let's go to Saudi Arabia. And my wife said, I don't really want to go to Saudi. Okay, how about Kuwait? Okay, well, let's go to Kuwait. And we were looking for jobs, nurse, engineer. Things weren't that great in Alberta at the time. There's not really a lot of work, when at that point, like they weren't hiring a lot of engineers and or nurses. So this would have been the very, very early 90s, like 1990 kind of thing. So we decided we're going to go to Kuwait, and we started looking for work. And then Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that was over like an instant. And that ended up being the whole Desert Storm thing and everything else. And because I really wanted to go work on big power stuff as an engineer, but it couldn't find any work, so we moved to Yellowknife. So we went from the desert to the brown desert to the white desert in the north, and the company was not doing that well up there, and because we weren't actually going and communicating with the customers and talking to them, and I kind of set my way on, if it's a small community, if they just liked me, if we just liked each other, then maybe I can actually get them to give us the work. And since they're really across the street, and you'd meet them in the pub, or you'd meet them, at community meetings or those kinds of things, is I said about just getting to know people the same way I came to Edmonton. And if you're a nice enough person and you can communicate reasonably well, eventually, well, we should give this project to Nasim because he's a nice guy, right? And there's nobody else asking me for the work. And so you go through the process and you make some, quote, colleagues or friends, and you win the work. And then now it's do really, really good work, even though it costs you a whole bunch of money, extra money. In our business, we sell by the hour, at least on the engineering side. And if you go over the number of hours you go broke pretty quickly, but you have to over invest in that client experience. At that point, I didn't even know what that was, but you over invest in terms of the product you're delivering. And next thing you know, you now have advocates in the community that are saying, they did a pretty good job. He's a young guy, didn't quite get all the things, but we worked together, and I'd give him another chance, right? And so it's about building relationships, and then ultimately it's about building trust, right? In terms of, Colin's a good guy, Todd's a good guy, Ali's a good guy. Like just let's just be good people, and you'll do good work, and things will come your way, and just don't drop the ball, don't screw up, and do whatever it takes to not screw up. And you just continue to build on that, I think, until it actually you get that kind of scale that you're looking for in terms of repeat customers, more POs. Remember, I talked earlier, it was just one PO, but now you're getting 100 POs. Like that. Both Todd and I know Ashif Mauji very well, and for those in the tech community, Ashif's one of the local rock stars, and it's exactly what he did. There's a lot of guys that Todd and I hanging out with, and women as well, for sure. There's outstanding entrepreneurs that they just know how to get it done, and keep the customer happy, and then go look for the next one. And if you keep at it, and sometimes you actually have to work 18 hours a day to make that happen, but eventually you don't have to, right? Because now you build a team and everything else. And so I guess it's persistence to build trust, I guess, would be the way that I would say it got there, right?
Yeah, I often add, I really like what you're talking about there, is just going and doing a great job for somebody. And for the entrepreneurs I often talk to, it's like, just go and find a client, one client, customer. Like, I don't care how you get them, I don't care what you do to get them, but deliver and do great, and start building the next one, and then the next one. Like, if you can find 5 people who love what you do, that's a good start. Don't worry about the 500. And I think that's a big gap that I see when I talk to entrepreneurs, is this idea that I need to be $1 million business. It's like, how about you just go make a $10 business first, and then just keep kind of growing from there. You can comment on that if you like. I have one other question, then I want to open it up for some others as well.
I'll throw.
Yeah, totally. It just reminded me of Todd's story about when he met that lawyer that was across the road, which is he had enough guts to go in there and ask nobody he's seen before whether he can wash his car for him. Like, how many of our entrepreneurs today are saying, "Can I wash your car?" Right? Like, it just doesn't seem to happen as much today. But this is where Colin and I started with this whole program, earlier on, is can we get MacEwan students just to figure out, like, could you make money washing cars? If you can, awesome, do it, because you're not going to be a tech company yet, but maybe you will be, something else after that. What you need to do is you need to learn the Todd skills before you can actually be, the $1 million, $2 million, $10 million company. You need to go wash Buddy's car for a while, or break concrete, right? Or cold call. Get the skills, and that means working hard. Like, when the rest of my buddies in high school or pre-university were taking the summer off, I wasn't. When they were running around meeting new friends and spending too much time in the bar, I actually waited until university to do that. But it's because that's also worthwhile too, because you meet a lot of good people in the bar. It's amazing how many people you can meet there, right? But it's just be persistent, right? And learn those basic things, right?
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, I was going to throw in, I had one more thought that to your comments, Colin, about overcoming adversity and finding a way. And I remember this. I was watching a documentary on Liberace. I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago or something. And he mentioned this book by Claude Bristow called The Magic in Believing. So I seek this book out. It's kind of some fairy stuff in it that's a bit weird, but it really came down to the message I got out of it was believing in yourself. How do you really believe in yourself, and how do you believe you can get stuff done? And through that, I'll share my third book, which is, so I love Dale Carnegie, and I read this book once a year, and I'm always amazed how it reminds me how to be a good human and how to break out of my shell. And it's the 1, 2, 3 book on how to just get to yes. I mean, and I've been after my son to read his book since he was like 14. He finally read it last week. Took 8 years to get there, but I think it's a fundamental. It's an easy read, but wow, the message in it and how those guys did business, and just it was awesome. So
that's a great book. And again, what I love about it is that you've got these books either lying on your desk or at quick reference all the time. I mean, there are some fundamental ones that I think all entrepreneurs should be reading. Those are a couple of them for sure. So appreciate that. On the sales question, the last question I really want to ask is, let's discuss a little bit about the difference between maybe technique and communication. Right. And I go back, Todd, with your recording that guy and doing that thing. Was it a bunch of techniques that he did, or was it the way that he communicated? And same with both you now, Nasim and Todd, as you are dealing with things, what is it? Just following a bunch of 1, 2, 3s? And if you do it a certain way, it's going to close the deal? Or is it more about communication? And if it is, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like first you got to know what you're talking about, right? So you have to have the confidence to deliver a message and be able to back it up with facts. So if you're all about bullshit, that'll be sought out pretty quick. So myself and Nasim, we deal with professional people that you can't snow them. You have to be able to talk facts and become a subject matter expert in what you're talking about. And once you get that, that's really why I listened to those tapes with the guy back then, because he knew the product so well. But I think beyond that, though, what I've learned to do, and I think this is a big thing, and Nasim knows it too, is you learn to read the room. You can pivot. When you're losing your audience and you're seeing their body language and you're seeing their eyes and you're seeing them shift, you got to be able to move quick to re-engage and get them back in. And I see a lot of presentations, and I'm watching the presenter and I'm watching the room, and I'm seeing people check out, and the presenter is not even seeing it. He's so focused on delivering the message, but he lost the audience 10 minutes ago. So I think that becomes, again, back to self-awareness, already knowing who you are. And if you can be authentic when you're speaking and read the room properly and know when to pivot and shift, that really is experience. There can be some naturals at it, but I had to learn that, and I still am learning it. But I see it and I think, oh, why didn't he pivot when he could have? And then the sale's gone. So it's as much as knowing your knowledge, but also knowing who your audience is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that. And, I call it sort of chameleon skills, right? Which is, so under what environment can you rapidly sort of change your spots or your stripes? And I found this particularly useful in international business too. And so we did, we've done some work in South America, did some work in with a national mining company out of Australia and England called BHP Billiton, probably like one of the largest mining companies in the world. I did work in China. I've done work in northern Quebec, and Quebec is very different than the rest of Canada, and it's an unusual place for non-francophone to go and do some work, but just being able to sort of adapt to the people that were in the room and even the conversation style. And so if you've done work in China before, you know that you're just not going to walk in and say, you know, here's my stuff, buy it. You're there, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times and building relationships and having conversations. And yes, you're going out for late dinners and you're probably drinking your face off because there's a lot of booze involved in doing business in China sometimes. And I don't know if that's changed because it's been 10 years since I've been there, but the conditions are different in each of those locations. And I think your ability to be able to just read, like Todd said, read the room and just exactly who am I supposed to be right now in order to be able to fit in, to be able to make some kind of connection with them. And then and that often, I think, if you're persistent enough, it actually, and put the time into it, and it actually does work. But maybe the opposite to that is know that when you're cooked, because there's people that I've met when we first started opening up offices in British Columbia, people I met in Vancouver where there's not, no matter what it is I did, I could not connect with the principles of that company. We were Venus and Mars. And it was, I'm out of here. Bring somebody else in that is more capable than I was to be able to communicate with that customer, or somebody else from the team, and let them go have a try, if you will, because not all personalities actually mix with each other, right? We all hang out with people that we like, right? And whether it's in our friends or sometimes even with family, I guess it is, but we kind of it all has to fit, and it has to be comfortable, and it has to be enjoyable, and it just isn't always that way. So just know when to massively pivot, including yourself completely out of the room, and just introduce somebody else to it, because sometimes you need to change the actors in the drama, because there's a lot of drama that happens in business, an enormous amount of drama that happens in business. And sometimes you need to play a different character, and sometimes you just need a different actor, right?
That is some seriously rich stuff. And it comes back to that self-awareness, I think, as well, recognizing when you're cooked, how you're reading the room, what your part is, how you fit. It doesn't mean that the deal can't get done. It just means that it might not be done by you, which is humbling, but also being able to recognize the nuances of that. And so even in that room, Nasim, you probably have, as well as Todd, probably have the experience to see that. How would an early stage or solo entrepreneur, kind of in those early stages, be able to recognize that? Or how would you go about structuring your presentation or your pitch, or your, how would you surround yourself with the ability to capture that so you can learn it?
Toughest thing to learn is you can't see it necessarily yourself, and so I think a coach is likely the best possible way to do that. So you do your dry run, or you have other people around you that you pitch to, and they either say, I don't get what your pitch is, or like, who's the pitch for again? Are you going to go in that way? Like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of, right? Like to make it happen. So I think it's, first off, you need to, I think, get a little stoic about accepting the viewpoints of others on who you are. In other words, have a couple of friends, your spouse, your partner, whoever that is, that says, you're just not what you think you are, or you're not showing up the right way, or this is what I saw that I think you can improve. I think, like anything else, is if you had a ski coach or a swimming coach, somebody that said to you basically, as a swim coach, you breathe when you pull your head out of the water, not underwater, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, you've got it kind of all messed up, right? And I think that good close friends or partners, your business partners, pitching coaches or otherwise, those kinds of folks, your brother, your sister, but you got to be able to take it. So if you can't take that straight up advice from them, and if you can't adjust because of it, then you're just not going to get better. So it's really, I think, about having somebody else look at you and say, that's not going to work. And be okay with telling you, and then you need to be okay with hearing it. Okay, so this is really what this really is a combination of high IQ and high EQ people, where you can actually sort of fill your tank up with the advice of others and still walk out of the room and still like each other, right? And so you got to be grown up enough, mature enough to take it, because otherwise. So remember the first CEO of Uber, Colin something or other, I can't remember what his name is. The guy was a complete crapper. Like he was all about him, and people all around him were wondering why he was who he was. He was showing up on all the wrong ways, and eventually he gets bumped off as CEO, even though he's the founder, because he didn't have all that it took, because he didn't understand himself. Right?
I'll throw in one comment too, as a segue. I think the other thing is you fail. You fail and you dissect that failure, and you do it again and you fail. You dissect that failure, and then you do it again, and you find a small win, but you're not perfect. And you just keep on working on it, right? But failure is the best way to succeed, and accepting the failure and not giving up. And you're going to fail. And thank God you're going to fail, because if you don't, you're not going to learn. So embrace the suck, embrace the fail, and then just keep on going.
That's a great point, Todd, because I think that I've probably learned more about all the times I've screwed up than I have on other things. Like not many people know this, but I own a whole bunch of land in Haiti, and Haiti is a really crappy place to do business today. And it was an extremely bad business decision that took years to convince us to write it off the balance sheet. And it was a dumb mistake. It was an absolutely dumb mistake that we should have never been in business there. And so if anybody wants non-oceanfront property in Haiti, I've got a little bit. I'm pitching in case somebody wants to buy some.
I don't think anyone's buying.
If it's lakefront, I'm kind of open, but maybe oceanfront. Well, anybody else want to ask any questions? I certainly have dominated a lot of the questions so far, but if anybody else has anything they'd like to ask, I'd love to open it up.
I actually have tons of questions.
Of course you do, Colin. That's awesome. And I had to, by the way, I had to put Travis's name in there for the Uber, just to make sure that we didn't mistake it with another Colin, because Collins are generally stellar. And I'll just.
It's an important clarification. So this question actually goes out to everyone, which is what drove you initially, and what drives you now?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's easy because I've actually found my way in the last few years better than I ever have. At first, it was financial success, period. And that turned out in the last almost exactly 6 years, it turned out to purpose for me. And if I nail purpose, then then the financial success, I think, comes behind it. And some of that came from Stoicism. And if you read a little bit of Stoicism and you read about the Marcus Aurelius sort of folks and how they lived their life, the original sort of Roman or Greek mythologists and not mythologists, but ethicists and others. You realize that especially as you start to get older, that the only thing that matters at the end of the day, I think, when you're lying on your deathbed is did you have a happy life, right? And there's lots of books about that you can read about, and I'd put out a book right now, but it's probably an audio book on my phone or something, which is it's called The Good Life, which is I think written by Marcus Aurelius, which like 2,000 years ago, and it's about having a happy life. And here's the here's one of the, at the time, the world's wealthiest people, and all he really cared about at that point was as he got older, was to be happy doing what he's doing, and it had nothing to do with money at that point, right? And so really, money comes, or recognition or whatever you see as your pound of measurement. Right? At the end of the day, it's really, I think, just about making sure you've lived a good life, and everything else comes through that process. I do really believe that the more that you contribute to the community, the more that you actually do for people around you. And yes, you are still in business, and yes, you do want to have, you know, earnings at the end of the year. But if you just focus on earnings, purpose never comes. But if you focus on purpose, earnings do come.
I just had a follow-up from that, Nasim, which is that initial drive, you know, for financial success. Did that come from like a hunger, like, you know, like my parents didn't, you know, have that much, and I don't want to be like that, so I'm going to work my butt off? Or was the financial success more like a scoreboard, and you want to be the best, you want to have the highest score?
Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of influencers around me where I really tried to, you know, which I really understood what the score should be, right? You know, as you've been in business long enough, you suddenly realize that, I mean, like Jeff Bezos has got more money than anybody, like, and so, you know, what does that look like? There's so much money you can't even count it, or the Bill Gateses, or all those other people, right? And so that scale of money, you know, I wasn't looking for that scale of money at all, because I had no idea what that scale of money really looked like. But you're right, it did actually came from, again, it came from adversity. It came from, you know, my parents moving to, you know, a country as immigrants, landing, you know, in the port of Montreal in 1966 on a ship with nothing but a Volkswagen and 4 suitcases in the back, and seeing how your parents sort of scratched out a life and succeeded or didn't succeed or failed, in our case, a number of different times, and you just don't want to be that kid, right, or that young adult or that grown up. You want to do better than you saw your parents doing. And you know, that's I think kind of the life of an immigrant, right, is somebody that comes new to the country, is especially in Canada, is your opportunities entirely yours, and you're starting with nothing, like literally nothing, you know, other than a Volkswagen, right? And you want to do better, right? And you want to have more than that. And for a period of time, I think that's where that came from. And once you start to accumulate those things, you just kind of realize, like, do I really need to have all this stuff that I got, right? Like, and you know, that somebody's going to have to shovel out of here in 30 years and throw in a big blue bin on the outside of the house, and like, it's just stuff, right? Like, and it doesn't actually, it's great to surround yourself by it, but and it feels good, you know. I guess if you had a lot of money, like cash money, you wouldn't mind rolling around in it either. But really, at the end of the day, it's not what keeps you going, and it's not what gets you out of bed in the morning, right? But you know, purpose really does. And so I guess the short version of that, Colin, is it's really, again, about adversity for me, or a perception of adversity, and a desire to succeed, and then later on a shift to what is a more mature view of how one should run their life, right?
That's awesome. Todd, do you want to comment on any of those things?
Yeah, you know, it's as I heard Nasim describe it, it's very similar. You know, initially you don't have money, so you think, okay, well, I don't want to live this life of washing the car for the rest of my life, so how do I find a way out of this thing? And so I think initially for me, it was just, I knew that Canada could provide more than just me being a walking zombie on the planet. So what am I going to do about it? And so you come out of the gate wanting to be your own guy and not answering to somebody else, and then you create that for yourself. And then as you start to gain success, and you become more mature about that success, as Nasim mentioned, you just the journey changes, right? It changes. It morphs into like more philanthropic, more being a better human, more mentorship. It's really cool how it evolves. I don't think any entrepreneur, at least what I know, is stuck in that more at our age. You go through those phases of you build, you mature, you get smarter, then you start to give back, and you start getting rid of all your shit, and you want to help out other people. You want to be able to, you know, a lot of my son's friends in business school, you know, I'm kind of quasi mentoring them just to, you know, what to do. And I love how these kids ask me questions, and they'll look at me and like I'm some sort of entrepreneur god, but I'm just a dude that's been through a lot of stuff, and I got some experience, and I share it with them. Like, oh my God, that's incredible. It's like, well, no, it's just, but I will tell you this, you know, my son, who's now in school with you guys, and he's at CIBC working, I was pretty soft on him. If my dad was as soft on me, I don't think I'd be where I was today. And that's a lesson learned too, right? I think I could have been much more tough with my dad, but problem is my dad, and I haven't talked to him in 15 years. I'm talking about Bish now. So the man who gave me the hard lessons were so hard, I don't ever want to see him again. I didn't want to be that guy with my son. But you gotta go through some adversity to know it's real, and you got to feel that to get through life. And I think if I could, my son will end up fine. I know he will, but if I could have tossed him out to the wolves like Nasim was talking about, sent him out to Kuwait for a few years, got to toughen some of these kids up. But the world experiences, they'll teach you that for sure. Hope that answered your question, Colin.
I think so. Yeah, and it's been. I have a bunch of other questions in reserve, and I don't want to take up. I don't want to hog all the airtime, so I want to let some other people ask some questions if they have them. But if they don't, I can jump right back into it.
Ali, do you have a question, Ali?
Paul, thank you very much for this great session. It's really insightful. I love when people are talking about things they know, really they've been there, right? And sales. I'm a prof, and lots of students come to see me once they're done with their Bachelor of Commerce and say, what do you think I should start with? What I should do, right? So very often I suggest to them to start with sales or project management. Sales, because you have to show the value. Basically, you need people ready to buy from you, otherwise you do not exist. And project management, because you manage people who don't report to you functionally. So you have to be good at convincing people to do things rather than them being afraid of you and to do things. So I really enjoyed this discussion here today. So one of the questions I have is, and I have done sales myself, right? So that's another thing. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So all of you are talking about being basically persistent, resilient, not giving up. But we also know that a lot of businesses fail. I mean, when you start a business, there's a huge chance that it will fail more than it will succeed. So it's very important to know when to stop, right? That's another thing. So you don't want that resilience and that persistence to be transformed into stubbornness, something that will lead you to, will keep you basically in something that will never take off. So any insights on that basically threshold? When do you stop being persistent, basically?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I'll use our Haiti business or businesses as an example, which is that when we went in with a partner and on purpose to reduce risk, right? So there was two different companies involved. Both of us put capital in to share the risk. So that was step number one in sort of that new venture, share the risk. And it means you have a partner, right? The second one is that we decided right at the very beginning that we were going to get into this venture. We're really unsure about whether it would get anywhere, but we decided how much we're going to lose. And that was I think just over $1 million US. We said if we lose $1 million US without the capital on this project, then because the capital could be stranded, which it ended up being, that's when we would stop. No matter what, we were just going to stop. And so it's kind of, Todd's a really good Vegas guy, right? So you take dollars with you to the tables, and when you're done, you're done. That's it. And you have to be
casino, right?
In the casino, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think business is not really any different than that. Is that you're going to try, you're going to do your due diligence, you're going to do your research, you're going to do all those kinds of things. It's kind of like making deals too. A lot of the companies that we talk to in terms of acquisitions over the years or partnerships is, let's talk about getting married, and then the next thing we do is we talk about getting divorced. And we put those deals on those terms on the table as part of the agreement, so that we all understand at the end of the day, under these certain conditions, this is no longer going to work, and then it's business, and you're done. You're back out, right? So I think again, it comes down to Ali. It's having a high EQ approach to the investment decisions that you're making, and don't keep on going, because at $1 million it could have been easy. Well, let's go to $1.2 million now. I just pulled the pin, and peed off a lot of people in the process. So the guys that were running the projects for us, so we're done, we're out, pack up your bags. We're not going back. It's over. And, we lost, we lost people because of they thought we should keep on investing. And I said, we're not going to keep on investing. We laid the rules down. Let's stop and move on to something else, because we don't think we're going to recoup our investment at any point. So let's just write it off and move on.
I think that's that's really good. It's so easy to follow good money with bad money, right? Drawing a pretty strong line in the sand, I think, is really wise. And can you equate that back to sales? I mean, even going in, and how far do you push? How hard do you push on trying to create that sale to make that happen?
Yeah, maybe I'll let Todd do that one.
Well, Elliot, it's a really good question. It's a tough one as I think about it for a guy like me that's the eternal optimist, because I'm always about yes and not giving up. But I'll share an example of a situation that happened. So we bought into a dealership, a furniture dealership in Calgary 8 years ago, and then one in Winnipeg a year after that. So we had 3 locations, of which Edmonton I owned 100%. I was a one-third partner in the Calgary dealership and a 2/3 partner in the Winnipeg dealership. And the USAs were equal. No one had power. And so I muddled around with these guys for 6 years. I didn't even realize how much it was dragging me down until I went to a leadership session in Banff. CIBC and Denton's and some other firm put on the speaker series. And the second last speaker was a inspirational story about this boulderer. He was an adventurist that was bouldering in the outback in Australia with a buddy. And one big boulder became dislodged on a riverbed and it pinned him. And he couldn't move. The boulder was way too big, so he was stuck. His torso could move, his head could move, his arms could move, but he was pinned, and his buddy could not dislodge him either. So his buddy had to walk out. They agreed. Buddy would walk out 2 days, get help, 1 day back, and hopefully this guy pinned wasn't going to be eaten by whatever was out in the outback. So the buddy who left comes back 3 days later, and the pinned buddy is still alive. Surprisingly, he made it through. They dislodged the boulder. He wakes up in the Sydney hospital with no legs. They had to be amputated. And so he went through this journey for the next 6 months of feeling sorry for himself. And he was an outdoor guy, and he said he couldn't get back, and he couldn't do bouldering, and he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. Then he realized his perspective was just wrong, and he changed his perspective and then became more of an adventurer post-accident than pre-accident. It's all how we thought about it. So his message really was, your life will be disrupted. It's going to be shitty. So how are you going to get ahead of it? What are you going to do right now about it? And I had a number of things in my life that weren't working for me. So on the drive back, my COO and I, at the time my COO, I said to him, Jason, I got 2 things that cause me grief every single day that drag me down. One is my partnership in Winnipeg. One's my partnership in Calgary. And so between Banff and Calgary, we had called our lawyer. We struck a shotgun for the deal in Winnipeg. And between Calgary and Red Deer, we figured out an exit clause that would get us out of the deal in Calgary. And so when I got those 2 things done, Jason and I, it was like this big weight. And I don't know if I could have seen it. I was so invested, Ali, that it was kind of like, if I didn't hit that thing in Banff, I probably might still be in this thing because I'm the optimist. So sometimes I think the entrepreneur can go too far and be too invested. And so when do you quit? It's a great question. I mean, for me, it was just, I had all this grief internally that was causing me frustration. And for me, that would be the trigger. So my lesson through that was, when I get there again in any business, if I'm just feeling a lot of heavy burden and grief, then I'll probably check out. But again, that's just part of learning the process. I wouldn't have known it unless I learned it through that whole series of events. It's a great question.
Maybe another way you can deal with it is having a partner who is a little bit more risk adverse, I guess. So they can remind you that you're spending too much money on something that will not take off.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think that's comes down to what we were saying earlier, is having people around you that are somewhat opposite to you. And that's not obviously a coaching moment as much as it's an observation on what we kind of came around to. Well, it's 5 minutes to, and that was a blast of 90 minutes. And in my mind, awesome, just encouraging, amazing, and inspiring, and full of lessons. So I'd like to thank both Nasim and Todd for coming today and talking about this. We're going to do this, in 2 more weeks, I think. The next, the 6th of August is the next one. 1:30. We're going to get invites out to through some of the social media channels. You can check in with me, Nasim, MacEwan, and we'll make sure Colin and/or Vivian, if you guys can let me know some of the tags, we can get it out to some of our folks and get some more people in. I think this is a good start for us to show how cool it is and how much fun it is. Next time, I think maybe what we need to do is actually show up on the patio with some beers and have some good chats that way. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
Just thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Ellie. Yeah, nice to see you again too. This is interesting, and because Todd and I actually have these kind of conversations whenever we meet, and have been doing it for moving on to well into the 2nd decade, right? And so going and hanging out with other entrepreneurs that get different levels of experience over time, like the war stories that we could tell about things, and we're not even the Warren Buffetts of the world. Imagine how many war stories that dude's got, right, in terms of his career so far. And I think that ultimately for me, that I think that business is extremely simple. And when you get fancy with it, it likely is going to bite you along the way. And so, and it's sort of back to how we started these things. Colin, it's the simple things like sales and marketing and development of teams. So we've got Catherine Warren coming in next time from Innovate Edmonton, who's our wonderful CEO there. It's all the basics that we need to learn and master, really. And then if you put that together with good ideas and then really good people, you can kind of do anything you want. Like it's all that, right? Like that's the recipe, right?
It's that idea. It's go and sell something, right? You got to have an idea, and the only way to prove it is if somebody buys it. Right. And then once you start selling one of them, sell 2 of them and 5 of them and then 500 of them eventually. But it starts with that, and then surround yourself with great people. I love that simplicity of it. Todd, you got anything to finish up with? It was really incredible.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this, guys, and thanks again for inviting me out. I guess I'll just leave you with this. Whenever I've said yes and I didn't want to say yes, the result was always awesome. And there's all kinds of points in my life, and I was at a crossroads and I had a yes or a no, and the yes has always been much more gratifying. So my challenge to all of you, and even next time your buddy says to you, let's go for a beer, let's go do this, and you never know what's going to happen when you actually engage, lean into life. The opportunities are out there. They're everywhere. It's just knowing how to seek them and capture them, but it starts with leaning in, and then who knows what's going to happen. But if you say no, dead stop. So it's all about saying yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I don't think we could have done any better if somebody else led this whole thing. So, but yeah, finishing right at 3. You guys are incredible. Thank you for your time, for your energy, and great experience to be sharing with entrepreneurs everywhere. I'm going to turn this into some videos as well, as long as you guys are okay with that. Get it chopped up into some maybe little sound bites. It would be great to show some of this on some